So, Mr. Hoover, I think the only way that I could sufficiently and humbly welcome you and introduce you to this great crowd would be to say that on behalf of everybody who's here today, I thank you, sir, for everything you did for this country, for the aerospace industry, for your character, for your friendship. You've touched many, many lives. I'm sure there's a lot of pilots who come up to you to this very day and say, Bob Hoover, because of you, I do what I do and I fly. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Bob Hoover.
I would like to say thank you for all of you turning out here. This airport is sort of like home to me. I first started flying my airplanes out of here in 1950, and up until just a short time ago when I had to retire from flying for health reasons. This has all changed. All of these hangars, and it's like going away for 30 years to see what's happened since I quit flying here. But I'd like to tell you I'm humbled by seeing all of these friends who I've admired and respected that worked for North American Aviation. They've done so much, so many accomplishments, and you've heard of most of them here today. But to be associated with these fine people has been the treasure of my life, more than anything else. I look over here at my ace friends, and I'd like to tell you that the epitome of being a fighter pilot is to become an ace. And I have respected and admired each and every one of the many aces that there have been in our great country. I never quite got there, but believe me, I tried as best I could. I'm pretty crippled up now. I had to bail out of an F-84 when I was on the X-1 program with Chuck Yeager. And he and I had additional responsibilities other than the X-1 program. When it wasn't scheduled for flight, we would test whatever the operations people wanted us to fly. And I was testing a new 84 that had a different engine in it. And this was, right after Chuck had gone faster than sound, and I was next to go. And I went into the operations, and there was my name on the board to test this airplane. And I was up over the Mojave Desert at about 40,000 plus feet, and I got fire warning light on, shut the engine down, and the engine seized. Now, normally that would throw the turbine wheel right through the fuselage and cut the tail off. But in my case, it didn't. It was an airplane that had the first ejection seat that we had in the United States. We copied it from the German airplane, and I'm going to show you a film in a minute here that you'll be able to see this airplane. It was a Heinkel 162, had a jet engine mounted on the top of the fuselage, and he designed the ejection seat for it in order to get you above the intake of the engine so you wouldn't get sucked into the engine. And the ejection seats in those days had such a powerful charge, if you weren't frozen in the position that you had to be, you were sure to get your neck broken or your back. And I was scared to move once I knew what I had to do. I had to get out because I'd lost all my controls. So the control rods had burned through, but the tail was still on the airplane. And so I just started pitching over, and I was scared to move. Finally, I decided I've got to, and I reached up and grabbed that canopy handle, and I went with the canopy and hit the tail, broke both legs through the back of the knees, and boogered up my face from my face hit the knees. And fortunately, I had my oxygen mask on, and the helmet was still with me at that point. But let's look at that film, whoever's operating the projection.
Introducing a legendary test pilot. Today, America's premier air show performer, Mr. Robert A. Bob Hoover. Bob has thrilled audiences all over the world with his stunning performances in the Shrike Commander and the Saberliner business jet. He's a big show-stopping attraction for all ages, especially children. Bob's aviation career started during World War II, where he served with the 52nd Fighter Group. He was shot down over the Mediterranean while single-handedly dogfighting with 5 German fighters. He was held prisoner till war's end. In 1946, Bob was assigned to Wright-Patterson to test and evaluate captured World War II aircraft. Later, he was selected for the X-1 program, where he became lifelong friends with Chuck Yeager. In 1950, he became a test pilot for North American Aviation, test flying F-86s and first flighting the Navy FXJ-2 and the T-28. He traveled the world demonstrating jet aircraft performance capabilities for our troops. Korea, the Philippines, where there were jets to fly, Bob Hoover was there. He's performed in numerous international air shows and today puts on both foreign and domestic air shows at over 35 geographic locations. He's been awarded the highest military honors, together with over 100 of the world's most prestigious aviation awards. In 1988, Bob Hoover was inducted into the Aviation Hall of Fame. Sit back now and enjoy flying excerpts of the man who is known today as a living aviation legend. The one, the only, Robert A. Bob Hoover, flying the Saberliner business jet and the Shrike Commander. Robert A. Bob Hoover. A magical, all-American name that packs the house at air shows all across America. Truly one of the most popular and respected names in American aviation.
So a lot of people don't really know what we test pilots have had to go through. Sometimes it looks like it's a pretty straightforward thing, but hours and hours of boredom in many cases, with stark terror every now and then squeezed into the program. When I had to run these tests on the spin for the F-100, I did it by the textbook. Just going up and doing a stall is not acceptable in proving the airplane to the government according to the contractual arrangements and agreements on the design of the airplane. And the first spins that we did with it, we just stalled it like you would any other airplane. It would recover from the spin very comfortably. However, if you crossed your controls, and we had to do that to prove that the airplane could be recovered no matter what you did with it, and you're thinking in terms of a second lieutenant right out of cadet training, and the textbook, the handbook for the specifications require that you decrease your airspeed 1 knot per second. And when you get it there, then you cross controls, and that's the worst thing in the world you could do. And so the airplane, instead of having the nose drop through when you tried for the recovery, the nose pitched down and up and down and up. And I had a drag chute, you saw that extended. It was useless, it was just floating up straight up. I had a planned test card that I'd written up, and I had to change the control application every 4 turns in an effort to find some way to get it out. And the first thing I did, of course, when I wanted to recover, was hit the afterburner, but it would not ignite. I was backing up. In a flat spin, you're turning about an axis, gyroscopic axis, that is about 500 feet in front of the airplane. So you're backing up for all practical purposes. Well, when the afterburner didn't take, and I later did recover from flat spins with the afterburner, so if that works, it's saved a lot of pilots. But the drag chute didn't work, of course. And so every 4 turns, I would change the control application, calmly say to the control people, the engineers in the control tower, I was going to the next set of control applications. And when it was all over, I listened to the tape, and I thought, I sounded calm. I wasn't calm, I was absolutely terrified. But when I got out of the airplane at minimum altitude, I looked up, and here's the airplane coming right at me, only it was spinning around me. And of course it went right past me real quick. And I was floating down, I had the parachute open, everything was good. And I went out onto the ejection seat, which is the easy way to go. And I was looking at the ground, watching the airplane spinning, and I kept saying to myself, don't stop now. Well, it obviously didn't. But I can tell you that a lot of times the weight distribution will break the gyroscopic effect. And I know that like Donald Douglas people called our company and asked if they could consult with me about flat spins. I'd done a lot of spins at a lot of other airplanes. And they were doing their tests for their specification requirements on the 101 Voodoo. And I briefed the test pilot on what I'd experienced and suggested that he give himself a little breathing room and be sure that he did everything right. But the airplane was completely uncontrollable. And I saw all the footage on the Voodoo spin test. And believe it or not, the weight distribution of him leaving the airplane and the canopy being gone broke the gyroscopic effect. And as a result, the airplane recovered by itself, and he's floating down in a parachute, and it bellied in on the desert floor there at Rock. And it just gives you some idea. There's a lot of quirks about spins. You could do them for years, and sometimes they just don't want to come out. I remember I'd flown that Commander for 25 years, and I'd done 5-turn spins at every exhibition I participated in, and never had a problem. It always come right out. Well, this one day in Fort Worth, it just went flat on me, just like the F-100. And I took the throttles off, and I slammed one throttle forward, and that wouldn't stop the rotation. Normally it would. I did spin tests on the P-38, and that just used to be standard practice, to put it in a flat spin and then recover with the other engine, and the good one off and the other one on to stop the rotation. Well, that didn't work with the Shrike. But you're going, like I mentioned, you're going backwards. And your elevators, if they're up, it takes all the force you've got, if you don't have irreversible controls, to push that yoke forward and hold it there. So I did this. I stiff-armed it with my left hand and took both throttles off, and I slammed them together. And I got that elevator so that it was in the power at the same time, and it came out. But boy, I'll tell you, I never did another spin in that airplane. And that's the same reason I quit with the Mustang. We used to think we had some consistency there on spin recovery, but that's not true. One airplane will spin differently than another, and I've been very concerned on a number of flights where I was flying somebody else's airplane, and it wasn't rigged as it should have been, and the airplane was very difficult to recover from. But I've had a great life because of all the many people I've met and the folks I've respected. And my time with North American and Rockwell will always be remembered as the best, the very best. Thank you.
Question is, what was the altitude that you started for your flat spin when you ejected?
42,000. And the elevation up in the desert's about, I think, 2,300 feet. You know, one interesting aspect of doing specification flying, we had the F-86 go through a lot of growing pains in its early days, and we had spin accidents, and there were quite a number of them, and the pilots, in most cases, were lost. But I had done spins in the F-86 hundreds and hundreds of times, demonstrating it all over the world to different countries that bought it. And I got to tell you, it was just as honest as anything you've ever seen. However, I was demonstrating it to the Air National Guard from 3 or 4 states up in Boise, Idaho. And the maneuver I'd started with, I'd do a double Emmerman, which was sort of difficult to do because you get so slow over the top. And then I'd kick it into a spin at the top of the double Emmerman. That'd be 5,000 feet above the ground. And I would be pulling out at about 5,000, I'd be higher than it to make the pull out. But as soon as I booted the rudder for the spin, boy, the airplane wrapped up on me like going straight down, just spinning like this. And I thought, what in the world is going on? I looked out, and I saw one slat was racked, which means that it was opened at the root and closed out on the end of the wing. And it was stuck in that rotation, because just going like this. And we had a lot of accidents where the pilots did survive, and they said they couldn't stop it from spiraling. And so I just powered it out. I went to full throttle on the engine, and sure enough, I was able to get it out. And I got in on the base operations, and I called up Smokey Caldero, who was a 2-star general in flight safety over at Norton Air Force Base. And he had been to North America and visited with us a lot about all these spin accidents. And I had done the spins with all kinds of unusual loadings where you'd think you'd never get out, where you're asymmetrically loaded up with tanks and bombs on one wing and the other one clean. You could get it out every time. Well, I called Smokey and I said, Smokey, I just found out what's wrong, what caused all those accidents. Please do me a favor and clear the records for pilot error. And the great company I worked for, North American Aviation, listened to me, and they put side rollers on those slats so that it would be impossible to have the slats racked like that. And a little side story, I flew out in the Southeast Asian countries at the CETO conferences. I'd go out each year to fly different countries' airplane. And I was going to the Philippines this one year, and our tech rep called me up and he said, they're building that airplane from scratch. The people over in Southeast Asia don't like to lose face if you have a problem with one of their airplanes. And so they said, boy, he said it's shined up and they've just gone through it. And I showed up and I was in my business suit and I walked over and I ran my slat check, which is to pull the slats out and then have somebody hold it in at the end and then see if it would come out by itself. And it didn't. And so I asked the Filipino crew chief, I said, is that airplane service right next to it? And he said, yes. And I said, let me check its slats. And I did, and he was okay. And so I took off and flew the show, and I came back, and Al Moorman was a 3-star general there at Clark Air Force Base. And he said, I was sitting next to the commanding general of the forces in the Philippines, and when he saw you swap airplanes, he said he turned pale. I had no trouble with it. It flew like a dream. But we then redesigned those slats to where we had a different leading edge on the wing, and those slats had side rollers as well. So it all worked out in the end.
Mr. Hoover, one second. I have a question for you, sir. In your book, I read that Yuri Gagarin kind of saved you from the KGB in Moscow. So as an intelligence officer, I was wondering if you'd say a few words about when you flew a Soviet aircraft in Moscow and what happened to you.
Okay, I hate to keep people waiting so long here, but I had performed, in 1965, I was over at the Paris Air Show, and President Johnson had stated that we would not have any participation in the Paris Air Show and in a U.S. participation. But we could have booths, but no flying displays. And I was over there for North American Aviation, just to snoop around and find out what I could that the other companies were doing. And Chet Bolin was the ambassador to France. And the second day of the show, he came out, he called and said he'd like to come out and visit with me. And this was the first time the Russians had ever come out from behind the barrier, if you will, and they brought the capsule that Gagarin went up in, and the Bokstad, and then they had the one there where they were the first to get 3 people in space at the same time. And they had Gagarin there, of course, and a lot of the top people, and they had their number 1 test pilot in Russia. He was a general, and very polished and spoke great English. Well, for some reason, the FAA our Air Force got the idea, the CIA did, that I had gotten pretty well acquainted with this general. And he had told me that he was flying the E-266, and it was a Mach 2 airplane. And at that time, we didn't have anything that good. And it turned out later on became the MiG-21. But they were absolutely, it was unbelievable to me. Can you imagine letting somebody from another country fly one of your secret airplanes. And they thought in 1966, when I was selected to be the U.S. team captain for the international aerobatic competitions, why would they let me fly that airplane? It'd be ridiculous. But they insisted, and I spent some time at Langley being shown what I could anticipate would happen to me. And I was assured that the ambassador would have me out and I wouldn't get under arrest if I flew one of the Russian airplanes. Well, they didn't let me fly anything but the airplane that they had won the competition with, which was a Yak-18, and it was built for no other purpose except to win the competition. And we had home-built airplanes. That was the best we had in this country at the time. And when they won the competition, 17 countries involved, they let me fly one of the winning airplanes that their team captain had been flying, and it had it serviced, and there were 1 million people on the Ticino airport, and no traffic jams, and a very polite applause when they won the competition. But I got in the airplane, and instead of taxiing out to the runway, I just took off from right where I started the engine and went straight for a dike that went all the way around 180 degrees of the Ticino show airfield. And I lifted it off the ground. I'd been watching it fly for 11 straight days, several times a day. And I knew how long it could fly upside down on the fuel they had. And I knew everything about it because it was pneumatic. Spitfires and Hurricanes, most of the British airplanes had pneumatics. Air pressure would take care of the landing gear, the flaps, and even your engine start. And so I've been watching this closely for 11 days. So I held it down and stayed on the ground till I had plenty of airspeed, and I had enough airspeed to pull up, and I retracted the gear as soon as I lifted off, but I had enough speed to roll upside down and make it look like I was going to go right into the dike. And so instead of getting up, I got up to the dike and I just pushed the nose up and went out of sight on the other side of the dike. Now everybody thinks, well, what's happened? He's lost the airplane. And I rolled right side up as soon as I got on the other side of the dike. And I flew all the way around 180 degrees out of sight, because I was below the level where they could see. And I rolled it upside down, over the dike, and across, and I did everything that they had done to win, only I did it inverted. Well, it was a great moment for a little while, and that was all, because when I landed, you hear these people who are stoic and never showing any emotion, they had no crowd control, and boy, they just came right out to where I'd parked the airplane. And I thought they were going to destroy the airplane. And I thought, boy, they're going to wreck this airplane, and I'm going to get credit for it. I know I didn't overg it or anything. And so finally they beat a path up to me, a bunch of soldiers with their rifles, and an interpreter was following right along behind them. And I couldn't get out of the cockpit. The airplane was rocking so bad. I'd try to stand up, and it was just really going up and down. And I asked the interpreter, I said, where are you taking me? Because I had a gun on me, a rifle. And he said, I'm not permitted to tell you, but you're under arrest. Well, they took me back to the hotel, and they had little cameras about the size of your thumbnail, and they had them placed all over the bathroom. So they were looking at you when you were in the shower. And I was briefed about all of these things by CIA at Langley. And they said, you're going to be taking millions of pictures of you wherever you go. And they were certainly true about that. And what they were trying to do was take enough pictures to where they could make you look like you were a homosexual with another man, and then blackmail you. And so they advised me I could expect that. Well, I didn't have any problem with that, but I didn't like somebody looking at me every time I went to the bathroom. Well, I went ahead and showered, and this was the big ceremony, the banquet at night, and so these guards, they had 2 guards posted on the door, so I couldn't go out of the room. And the interpreter showed up and knocked on the door and told me who he was, and he came in and he said, we're taking you away. And I said, where are you taking me to? I said, can I contact the embassy? No, I can't tell you anything. I can't tell you where I'm taking you. Well, in this hotel, the big auditorium had curtains that came down on each side and each end, and the curtains were up. And Gagarin was on the microphone talking in Russian. And he looked up and saw me, and we'd gotten pretty well acquainted at the Paris Air Show the year before. And he yelled for the guards to bring me into the platform there. And they did, and Garin went on and on. I didn't know what he was saying. I learned later it was a lot of complimentary things, but the head of what I guess would be their FAA said, he said, you've broken every rule we ever had because you're not supposed to fly any kind of an aerobatic maneuver below 300 feet, that you were right on the ground. And he said, however, we don't think you could survive 2 such flights, so we're going to release you, and we're sure you'll never do it again because nobody could survive that twice.